Welcome to the Schmitter's 100 Acre Woods. Today we'll be looking at the Kubota 2150 and replacing the seal kits in the cylinders. So first thing we're going to do is get the loader inside so that we have level ground and concrete to work on.
While everything's being held still.
So while everything's being held and none of the pins are out, taking a pipe wrench and loosening up the ends of the cylinders. These just unthread. So these have never been taken apart before, so ended up having to get a pipe to put on the end of the pipe wrench to be able to get some leverage to loosen that up. So here you're looking at the cylinders. We've already gotten the pin out of this one. The end there that's not painted, that is the part that we turned and loosened up. So we only undid one of the pins on the bucket so that the bucket would be held. And then here you can see once the end has been loosened by the pipe wrench, you can just take a normal wrench and spin that off. Once it's loose enough, you can loosen it by hand. There will be oil behind this, or there should be if it's not leaking too bad. So oil will come out, so you'll want a drain pan underneath. Once you have the end off, you can pull the rod out. Here the rod is being held in a vise, and you just take a 24mm socket and loosen up the end. That'll allow the piston to come off, and then allow the end cap to pull off the end as well. Those are the two things that actually hold the seals and will cause leaking. The piston that I just took off, that'll cause leaking on the backside, and the front piece is actually where you notice most of the leaks because that's where oil is exiting the cylinder. So you'll replace the seals in both of those pieces. So here's the seal kit. We were able to get this one from Messick's, and it contains all 6 seals you need for the end as well as the piston. So here we're using a heat gun to warm up the center seal so that it's more pliable, so whenever you go to put it in the middle it will bend. So once all the seals have been replaced, you can then push the piston back into the cylinder tube. A lot of times you'll need to rotate this as it goes in to help it slide through. So here we got a rod that just goes through the end of where the pin would go, and you can rotate and push and that will slide in. So once you have the piston in, you can then rethread the end cap, and you'll just tighten it, use a pair of pliers, and then just give it a little snug with the pipe wrench. It doesn't need to be super tight, just snug. Okay, now that the cylinder is back together, you can then put the pin back in the end so that it's holding the bucket. can see we jump to the other side and take the pin out of that one. Again, we do one side at a time so that the bucket's being held and doesn't just want to flop. Again, you want to make sure that you have the drain pan in place, because once you take the end cap off of the cylinder, it's going to leak some oil. And then whenever you pull the piston out, a lot more oil is going to come out from that. So you want to capture as much of that as possible. Again, here it is on the vise. We replace the seals and sliding the end cap back on. So you want the threads facing the piston, and then the piston goes back on. And then you take the 24mm nut and use a impact to put it back on. This should be fairly snug, so you can use the impact to get that put back together. And then you reassemble like we did for the other. So you get the piston lined up in the tube. You'll want to rotate and push. So here you can grab your rod and push and rotate to get that seated. And then you can put on your end cap, get it threaded on. And again, you can use a pair of pliers and then a pipe wrench to get it snugged up. Not being too tight, but snug. And then once the cylinder's put back together, you can go ahead and line up the pin and put the pin back in for the bucket. And one thing of note is we cleaned up all of the pins when we took them out, so you'll want to re-grease the pins that you wiped everything off of. Okay, so both of the ones for the curl on the bucket have been done. So now you need to start the tractor and work the air out of the cylinders. So you do that by just curling and uncurling the bucket. So this needs to be done because to do the other two cylinders, you need to relieve the weight off of them so that the cylinders aren't holding it up. So to do that, we just put a jack under the loader and had the jack hold the loader up. And then you can put the bucket in flow. So here, these have been apart, but are still very snug. So you can get a big pipe wrench out and a foot to get it loosened.
1 foot-pound.
And again, similar process here. You'll unthread the end cap for the cylinder. Again, there will be fluid behind that, so whenever you get that seal undone, hydraulic fluid will come out. So here we're trying to get the pin out. To do that, you may need to move the hydraulic valve so that it will release the pressure that is being held. Okay, again, you need to pull the rod out, so have someone move the valve. This will help relieve the pressure and it should pull out easier. Again, there's going to be fluid behind there, so make sure to have the drain pan handy. Okay, here's an above shot. Having the seals laid out, it's a good idea to put a piece of paper down, make sure that everything is there before you start disassembling. Again, using the heat gun to warm up some of the seals so that whenever you go to put them in, they're a little bit more pliable. So on the end cap that you see on the right that he's working on, you can take a screwdriver and work on prying the old pieces out. There's one in the center, one on the top. Here he's working the center seal in. After you warm it up, you can push it in and then use a small screwdriver to kind of work it down. A lot of this isn't very difficult, you just need to have patience to get that worked in and in place without tearing it. Once you get the center seal in, you can then work on the top one, and that just goes around a seat at the top. It's much easier to put in than the center. So then on the back you have a seal and an O-ring that just slide on. So after that's back together, you can then look at the piston. So here there's a leather piece on the outside, we just cut it, and then there's an O-ring underneath of that you can use a small screwdriver to pick out. So then you clean up any debris that may be in that groove, and then you take the O-ring and put the O-ring in first, and it should go on fairly easily. The orange piece that I have is leather, so as you put it on you need to stretch it a little bit, but it goes inside a groove that is a little bit smaller than the actual piston, so it takes a little bit of work to actually get that over. Again, another set of hands can be helpful to hold pieces as someone stretches it around, and just taking your time to work it on and without stretching it too much. Just so you can kind of see how long it takes to get that put on. So it does take some effort and some time to mess with, but it will stretch over. Okay, here we've switched to back on the tractor. We've reassembled everything. On the piston, put the nut back on, and getting the cylinder rod lined up back in the tube. There you go.
What do you think? Huh?
Yeah.
I made a piston ring compressor.
Right. So that leather piece I was talking about didn't want to come together as much there, so we actually took a piece of flashing, put it around to help compress that leather so that it would go up in the tube easier.
Where's it go?
That went down, I believe. And then the same process as the others, you use a pair of pliers and a pipe wrench to get the end tightened back together. Again, have someone move the lever as someone else pushes the cylinder in and gets the pin lined up. Here we moved the entire operation to the other side. We repeated the process of taking the cylinder apart, putting the new seals in, and reassembly. Here we're putting the cylinder back on using the same flashing there. Putting the rod through so you can help twist and push to get the rod back in the tube. And then reassembly by screwing the cap back on. Okay, I'll use them over there. And again, have someone move the valve so that you can get the cylinder compressed and get the pin put back in. Again, we try to clean up the pins while we have them out, so whenever you reassemble, make sure to re-grease everything.
That's how you tight.
Ta-da! 4 seals.
Okay.
Okay, so here we need to start the tractor up. So because we've done all 4 of the cylinders, there's going to be air in the system. So here you can see we are working the loader up and down and the curl function to work all of the air back into the tank. Because it's an open system, you can just work both extremes and the air will be pushed out. You'll notice that the loader runs slow until that air is worked out, so that will be normal. So here we're going to work the loader down again and put some pressure down to pick the front of the tractor up a little bit. This is going to be checking the seal with pressure against it to make sure that everything's seated correctly and it's not just bypassing. If a seal was torn, it would not be able to do that because it would just bypass. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you're able to learn something from this. If you want to see more content like this with other tractors, please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.